Welcome to Humanities West and the Commonwealth Club. Tonight's the second part of our program on the Vietnam War, the Lessons Unlearned, the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. And for those of you who missed it, on Wednesday night we had three historians speaking, three different points of view on what it means, what we could learn or not learn from the war and how it could be applied. That will be posted on YouTube within a couple of weeks. So if you missed it, you can see what led to this. And tonight we have three new speakers, and we have a slightly different approach, a little bit more of a practitioner's approach as opposed to the historians. In this case, we have Jeff Shaw speaking. He is a professor at the U.S. Naval War College, and he teaches upcoming officers maybe what they should learn from the Vietnam War. So he's going to give you a lesson that, you know, you can all pretend that you're going to be officers in the Navy. And you have to learn these lessons, right? So that's Jeff is first, and then Tom Berner is going to be speaking. He's an attorney and an author. He also, after 9/11, volunteered to join the Afghanistan Reconstruction Corps, which went to Afghanistan and tried to create the civilian infrastructure that was needed at the time. And so he's going to be speaking about how Afghanistan and what we did there was influenced by what we did and didn't do in Vietnam, and how we learned or didn't learn from that experience. And then we have Layli Heslop, who is here to speak. She was born in Vietnam, and she has spent her whole life during the war, I think, or just before the war. Well, actually, the war's been going on so long that you can't possibly be alive if you had not been born during the war of one point or another since World War II. But she's been in the United States for a long time and has been working back and forth between Vietnam and the United States on a lot of different peace projects and reconciliation projects. So she's going to give us her experience. And then we'll do the Q&A. So pretty much the way we usually do it. And if there are any questions, fine. If you please, everybody silence their phones so that you don't interrupt. I have to do it too. And we'll handle questions the way we usually do. If you're watching this as a live stream, we'll take your questions over the YouTube chat line. And if you're here, we'll have cards. For those of you who are here, I still have the cards we didn't quite get to last time. So those questions will be asked this time. Anything else? No. Let's get going. Jeff Shaw from the U.S. Naval War College.
Thank you, George. Well, thank you very much, George. And Teresa Nelson, thank you for inviting me. As George mentioned, my name is Jeff Shaw, and I teach a course called Strategy and Policy at the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island. So my task tonight is to explain to you how the Vietnam War influenced the development of this course called Strategy and Policy. And I have to start as a government employee with this disclaimer. These are my opinions. They're probably the same as those of anyone else at the Naval War College or in the Navy or at any branch of the government, but they might not be, especially when we get to the Q&A session. So just keep that in mind, and this is really just to protect myself. So what is JPME? Now, this is my only acronym, and I'm only going to use it in the beginning of this lecture. JPME is Joint Professional Military Education. So the students at the Naval War College are not Annapolis students or West Point students. These students are officers who have been in the military for 10 or 15 years already. And they're coming to Newport, Rhode Island, to the Naval War College to learn and be educated in the application of joint force. For example, a naval officer and an Army officer need to know how to apply military force, not just the force of your own service. The United States is never going to just send the Army into war. They're always going to have support from every other service, as well as other nations. We have over 100 officers from other nations, international officers, at the War College. This is a very valuable part of the education for our officers as well as for the international officers themselves. So that's what JPME is. If you are an American military officer that is going to be promoted, if you're selected by your service to be a general or an admiral, you must go to a JPME school. It doesn't have to be the Naval War College. It could be the Air War College, Army War College. You want to go to the Naval War College, though, because it's so nice. Look at that. Now, in reality, most of our classes are in these buildings over here. But all the postcards have that one. That's Luce Hall. So there you go. That's the JPME system. It's about all the time I have for that. What, though, does Vietnam have to do with it? Well, first, you may have heard of Stansfield Turner. He was the president of the Naval War College for 2 years. He came there from Vietnam. His one goal was to establish a course of study to avoid another Vietnam. Plain and simple. And the course that he developed is called Strategy and Policy. How can we avoid another Vietnam? But at the same time, we need to develop this course, but not talk about Vietnam. I don't want a bunch of officers to come in who may have been wounded in Vietnam, left their friends there, and then say to them, hey, how can we make sure we don't make this mistake again? You can't do that, right? You wouldn't do that. So, he adds the Peloponnesian War. You may have heard of this. You may have read Graham Allison's The Thucydides Trap, okay? But in 1973, people thought he was insane. You're going to talk about sailboats, spears, shields, and somehow the U.S. military is not going to get into another Vietnam? It makes no sense. But when you think about it, though, Athens, a sea power, sent an overseas expedition to Sicily in about the year 418 BC in their war against Sparta. The Athenians thought it was going to be a short campaign. It turned out to be a prolonged one. The people in Athens became dissatisfied with their government. Unbelievable. American military officers were perfectly willing to talk about the Athenians, and the same issues were right there on the table. So a really brilliant maneuver, right? You take an issue that resembles Vietnam, that you can work through some of the strategic choices and not even use the word Vietnam. So here are the lineup. This is the lineup of historical case studies. Now, Vietnam joins the list in the 1980s. And this is our current list. This is what we talk about in strategy and policy. And what we do is we attempt to think about strategic choices, strategies designed to accomplish some political objective, right? That's what it's all about. Some of these conflicts don't involve the United States, and that's helpful. The Russo-Japanese War, yeah, Teddy Roosevelt's in there, but still, it's mostly Russians and Japanese. So most of the other ones, we used to have the French-Algerian War. It comes in and out of the syllabus. We've had the Punic Wars. They go in and out. We don't have the U.S. Civil War because we don't want half our army officers in there yelling, "The South will rise again." So we don't do that. We don't do that. So there's our list of courses. That's our lineup. How do we do it, though? We have theorists. You've probably heard of Sun Tzu, The Art of War, Chinese theorist. You know, here are some of it. Know your enemy, know yourself, right? If you're ignorant of your enemy and know yourself, you're 50-50. If you don't know your enemy or yourself, you're always going to lose. That's great. That's great, right? Are these just platitudes, though? How useful is that? You know, what if I know that? I always lose money in the stock market. I never leave the blackjack table. And, well, I never do that. So how do you make his theories into useful reality? Well, we have these course themes. We made these up, and they all emanate from Stansfield Turner's view of how to avoid another Vietnam. You could run through all of these when thinking about Vietnam or the Peloponnesian War or anything else. The most important one is at the bottom. I hope you can see it. Culture and society. Now, in today's political environment, it's difficult to bring this one out. You know, it's not about knowing what kind of holiday card to send to your adversary. That's not our point. You want to know about your enemy's culture, or your adversary, I should say, or even your own, so you can make wise strategic choices. For example, when thinking about culture and society, these are some of the questions that might come to mind. And all of our course themes are nothing more than a series of questions, right? We don't have answers. Students don't come and like, hey, what do we do with China? Oh, good, thanks, got it. They think about it. They have to decide what we're going to do. So these are the kinds of things. So if you're thinking about culture and society, let's do a little exercise. The Tet Offensive. You've heard of it. You've heard of it, 1968, right? Here's a picture of the Tet Offensive. Now you're probably thinking, wait, the Viet Cong didn't use elephants in the Tet Offensive, right? They didn't do that. Well, the reason I put this picture in here is because Secretary of Defense during the Vietnam War, Robert McNamara, famously said, Vietnam to us is terra incognita. We don't know anything about it. They didn't look at the culture and society. If they did, they might have discerned that in 1789, the Vietnamese launched an offensive against Chinese invaders during the lunar holiday and drove them out. We didn't know that because no one had bothered to think about their culture and society. What if we had? What if we knew, hey, it's Tet, look out? No, that didn't happen. The Vietnamese also did think about some of the gaps and fissures in American society during the Vietnam conflict. One small example, 2 American aviators, Fred Cherry, Porter Halliburton, both shot down, both put in the Hanoi Hilton, purposefully put in the same cell. Porter Halliburton was from South Carolina. The North Vietnamese figured, hey, let's put them together. One of them will turn. We'll get one of these guys to talk just by putting them in the same cell. Didn't happen. The experiment failed. If I could recommend only one book to read for the rest of your life, Two Souls Indivisible. It's a story of human triumph out of the darkness of despair. So it's Porter Halliburton, as his health permits, talks about this every year to the students at the college. James Stockdale, also a prisoner, president of the Naval War College, 1977 to 79. Vice presidential candidate with Ross Perot, 1992. His Stockdale ethics course is a foundation at the Naval War College. Moral discipline, moral philosophy, stoicism. A select number of students are able to take this class. Okay, another theorist, Karl von Clausewitz, right? The Prussian, fought against Napoleon, fought for a little bit with Napoleon. 19th century, the most far-reaching act of judgment. Think about the kind of war on which you're embarking. It's the first of all strategic questions. What kind of war is it? Don't mistake it for something else. Page 88, 89, by the way. There's no quiz, there's no test. This is probably the most important. I put Sun Tzu first. We have Sun Tzu, we have Clausewitz, we have Mao. It's no accident that 2 of our theorists are Chinese. And of course we have naval theorists, Alfred Thayer Mahan and Julian Corbett. So that's the 5 theorists. We're not going to look at any of the other ones because we don't have time. So what do? We have historical case studies, we have theorists, and we have themes. So we have this kind of a witch's brew that we take, and the students grapple with these historical case studies, which I just showed you, and they look for examples of commonality between strategic choices and the outcomes of those choices throughout history. That's what they do. Now, they're not just trying to find common matches. They want to look for alternative courses of action. That's what they're looking for. We're going to run through a little exercise. Now, if we were in Newport, this would take weeks. Okay, so don't be scared. There's no paper assignment or anything. How does this work? We're going to start by assessing Vietnam from a strategy and policy perspective. What we're thinking of, different types of war, right? You got to figure out the type of war. Don't confuse it for something else. Don't try to make it into something else. If you think about Vietnam in the late 50s, early 60s, there's an insurgency in Saigon, right? There's an insurgency against the government, the Diem regime. It's a type of war. And the U.S. military is going to be involved trying to keep that insurgency under control. Counterinsurgency. It's a type of war upon which we were embarking at the time. Well, there's another type of war brewing at the same time. This is the one the military wants to fight. They want this. It's what they did in World War II. It's what they did in Korea with some success, maybe not as much. That's what they want to fight. There's Hal Moore. You might have seen We Were Soldiers or read the book. We were good at this war. Usually, the U.S. Army came out on the upper end of the stick against the North Vietnamese Army. But lo and behold, you got to also do that. You got to do that too. That's problematic for the Army and the Marines. Not that it wasn't done in some cases with some success, because it was. But it's a condition of some kind of strategic incoherence, because you're taking what was an insurgency, and from the Army's perspective and the Marines' perspective, you want it to be a conventional war against the North Vietnamese Army. That's what you're good at. Andrew Krepanevich's book, The Army in Vietnam, Mark Clodfelter's book, The Limits of Air Power. It was years before we figured out, hey, this was actually not the right thing. Oh, and also, there's the Cold War in the background, right? There's another type of war going on. It's not a hot war, and it's not a nuclear war, but the Johnson administration doesn't want any of the strategic choices that his military commanders are making to kick that into nuclear war. This is a recipe for failure. It's a recipe for failure. As was mentioned on Wednesday's lectures, it was a war without villains. None of these actors are trying to do the wrong thing. None of them want to be misleading the military or devising a bad strategy. But strategic incongruence prevails throughout the 1960s. So many people have said, well, but it's a one-off, right? It really never happened before, and it's not that likely to happen again. So it's not really something you can derive very many lessons from. And that's fair. That's fair. But if you're going to put it in the curriculum at the Naval War College, you got to counterpose it against other historical examples, right? You've got to use it in a lexicon of analysis. So let's take, for example, the British experience against the American colonists during the American Revolution. We'll run a similar exercise. Insurgency in the American colonies. That's what starts, right? Boston Tea Party, things like that. 1773, 1774. London has to respond. It's far away. It's an insurgency. But we got it, right? We do this all the time. We got this under control. Well, but George Washington has other ideas. He's creating the Continental Army. And another type of war, another layer of war appears. 1776, 1777. The British Army wants to fight that war. They're good at it. And in most cases, they get the upper hand against the Continental Army. Maybe later in the Southern campaign that changes. This looks similar to some of the strategic challenges that are emerging amongst British senior officers, the Howe brothers, the King and Parliament, Prime Minister. They're facing almost the exact same strategic dilemma as we faced, and they're facing it against us, right? Ladies and gentlemen, this is our experience. We should have known some of these things might come up again. Well, you're probably thinking, yeah, but there's no Cold War, right? Well, no, wait a minute. After 1778, France enters the war and creates a global maritime conflict against Great Britain. Almost exactly the thing that Johnson feared and Nixon feared in 1968, 1972. Royal Navy is now guarding not only the home islands, Gibraltar, India, the Sugar Islands of the Caribbean. The Army is stretched thin. Strategic incoherence, strategic dilemmas. They didn't have a strategy and policy course to figure it out. What happens? Yorktown happens. The colonies achieve independence, just like Vietnam achieved unification in 1975. Looking at almost the exact types of historical strategic options and choices made by political and military leaders. So there you have it, folks. Like I said, you can do this with any conflict. Think about strategic choices. Look at alternative outcomes. And if you do it enough times, you might be able to take some of those outcomes and think, hey, wait, let's not do what we did before. Let's look at the outcomes we thought about through our analysis of historical case studies and maybe try that. And that's a useful exercise, I would think. But we also need to think about our adversaries, because our adversaries want us to do Vietnam again, right? We don't want to do it, but they do, right? They want to create the conditions for us to do Vietnam again. Let's look at Saddam Hussein in 1990. This is 1990, young Saddam. These are some of the things that he said. Arab brothers, and again, he's talking to Arabs that were already part of the American coalition, Syria, Egypt. We don't have time to go down this rabbit hole, but I'd love to. It's a top-level view. Arab brothers, you know that the Air Force cannot settle a ground battle, right? And a lot of Americans would have agreed at that time, or even now, regardless of sophisticated weaponry. This is the rule governing all conventional and liberation wars. The Vietnamese people were the last to confront this. So what's Saddam saying? Look, I know the Americans have a powerful military capability, but the Vietnamese overcame it through sheer force of will, determination. We can too. He's using our experience in Vietnam to motivate his own people. What else did he do? Saddam knows that he doesn't have the same geopolitical environment that Ho Chi Minh had. He knows that. The Cold War in 1990 is different than it was in 1965. So Saddam makes a speech. He says, in order to facilitate the establishment of a genuine climate of peace in the region and restore stability, to expose the deception of the United States of America and its despicable ally Israel, Iraq will leave Kuwait when Israel leaves the occupied lands of Palestine, including the West Bank and the Golan Heights. This is clever stuff, folks. This is shrewd. Because Saddam wants to create those other layers of war, those other levels of war, to confound American strategists and politicians. Saddam also realized that American presidents since 1975 were reticent to lose troops. Of course, you're always reticent to lose troops. You don't want to do that. But after 1975, we had much more sensitivity to this because we did not want to be involved in another quagmire similar to Vietnam. So once President Bush loses 5,000 troops, he'll leave. Fortunately, we never had to find out if that was true or not. So what if we run through a similar little exercise? You have Iraq invades Kuwait. That's the war, right? August 2nd, 1990. Boom. There's Kuwait City. Iraqi T-72s. They're in. You all remember this. You watch it on CNN. That's the war. And as I said, you can hardly see the Cold War circle because it's almost over. In 1989, what happened in Moscow. You had Moscow Music Festival, Ozzy Osbourne singing in the Moscow soccer stadium. That's not the Cuban Missile Crisis, folks. This is a different Cold War. So Saddam needs to create some other ring, right? If you're going to confound American policymakers and strategists, you need to divert them. And he does this through leveraging the existing Arab-Israeli conflict with the comment that he already made, which I believe is quite shrewd. Okay, we'll leave Kuwait as soon as Israel leaves the Golan Heights and the occupied territories. He's trying to get Egypt and Syria out of the American-led coalition. That's what he's trying to do. How does he do it? He launches Scud missiles against Israel, right? You all remember this? It's a moment of truth for the coalition, the New World Order. It's a moment of truth. In an amazing display of restraint, Israel doesn't respond. They don't respond militarily to this provocation. It's unlikely that that would happen today. But in order to keep the coalition solvent, and in order to pay respect to President Bush, who had put the New World Order together, Israel doesn't respond. So Saddam tried to leverage the American Vietnam experience for his own strategic ends. He was a great student of America in Vietnam. But unfortunately for him, there were some other really great students of America's Vietnam experience. These guys, Colin Powell and Norm Schwarzkopf, they were there. They were not going to let Saddam out-Vietnam them, right? They were going to ensure that the quagmire did not happen again. They had students who were graduates of the Strategy and Policy course in Newport, Rhode Island, as senior planners. Their goal was not just to evict Iraqi troops from Kuwait. It was also to banish the ghosts of Vietnam. American troops marching down Broadway in Manhattan, marching in D.C. That's not a tank in Baghdad. That's a tank in Washington, D.C. on a victory parade. Norman Schwarzkopf and Colin Powell didn't get to do that when they came home from Vietnam, nor did anyone. They did now. You're banishing the ghosts of Vietnam. And it's not just the military that's trying to banish the ghosts of Vietnam. It's not just the military. Think of the late 70s, early 80s, The Deer Hunter. Who saw it? These are iconic. Apocalypse Now, greatest soundtrack of any movie ever made. Platoon, Charlie Sheen, brilliant portrayal. You have Sergeant Barnes and Sergeant Elias fighting for his soul in Platoon. Full Metal Jacket. What's your major malfunction? These are iconic. They're all the same genre, right? They're not happy movies. They're brooding, they're dark, they're sad. But what happens right after Desert Storm? You get Hot Shots. It's a comedy. What better way to banish the ghost than to just throw out a comedy? Look at Saddam with a cat nose and furry ears. It was a comedy. Charlie Sheen's in it too. It's different than Platoon. So the ghosts seem like they're banished in 1991. It's a time of celebration for that reason. But they sometimes pop back up. Even just in August of 2021, those ghosts just reappear occasionally. Joe Biden, President Biden. I don't want any pictures of the American helicopters over the embassy as we leave Kabul. I don't want that. Make sure it doesn't happen. Well, guess what? The ghost popped back out. What do we do about that? It brings up an enduring question. Is the idea of banishing the ghosts of Vietnam one of the ghosts of Vietnam? Do we always have to put that front and say, is that always our lead in for every strategic question? Make sure it's not another Vietnam. If it is, that's a good question. But will we ever get to the point where we can safely say, we know we're not going to do that again, so let's just think about it in a different way? At the end of the day, hundreds of thousands of Americans served honorably in Vietnam. And of course, we have our memorial in Washington, D.C. to those 58,000 or so who did not come home. We have the memorial in Hanoi for the millions of Vietnamese, mostly civilians, who perished. So for them, for all of them, we owe it to them, their relatives, their families, to not do Vietnam again, to not do it again. We owe it to the president, current and future, to make sure they never adopt this pose that Lyndon Johnson took in 1968 of total anguish, total personal and professional defeat. The quagmire of Vietnam after the Tet Offensive. Sadly dies 5 years later from a heart attack. We don't ever want to see these happen again. So how do we do it? Well, it's difficult. It's not science, it's not art. It's a little of both. If it's art of politics, diplomacy, and the military, that's the best we can do, according to Madeleine Albright, who knows a thing or two about this. So what do we do at the War College? We take Vietnam. Our course emanated from the Vietnam conflict. We use it in juxtaposition with other historical case studies, theorists, and different themes, and try to figure out how to make sure it doesn't ever happen again. So with that, folks, I thank you for your time and attention, and I'm going to hand it over to Tom. Thank you very much, everybody.
Tom Berner on Afghanistan and several other issues. He's going to go back to Vietnam as well. And I just want to make sure that if you have a question that you can fill out the cards. They're being passed around right now. They'll be collected a little later. And if you're online, you can just drop it into the YouTube chat. We're going to do all the questions at the end. So.
Talleyrand said that the Bourbon dynasty forgot nothing and they learned nothing. But this observation extends far beyond the French kings. It's a warning about the human condition. A failure to learn is common because even those who are trying to learn find that it's all too easy to learn the wrong lessons, thereby learning nothing at all. A major cause of this is a tendency to confuse intellectualism with intelligence, two very different concepts. Memory is the least of intelligence, and brain power is less important than discipline. Intelligence requires the accurate assessment of a situation. You have to examine the quality of the evidence in front of you, looking for the dogs that don't bark, to borrow Sherlock Holmes' phrase. Parsing the language to detect hidden bias, often inadvertent by the person doing the reports. You have to craft creative and efficient solutions. It's very important to say, well, what next? We take this act, what's going to happen? The most important part of intelligence is character. Character involves the subordination of the self for the greater good. Everybody suffers from hubris and narcissism. Character subordinates that to the mission. Without character, a vast array of intelligence, the qualities of intelligence are just simply absent. Empathy. You can't really move forward if you're not able to put yourself in the shoes of your opponent and figure out just where they're coming from. Honesty, not just with other people, but with yourself. The courage of your convictions also requires character. Sadly, even the institutions in America which have their reputations built on turning out students of character have abandoned teaching character. Intellectualism is a far more common concept. It's merely the creation of a narrative to describe the world or an idea. We're all intellectuals because we all create narratives, even if it's just simply, what's the most efficient way to mow the lawn? All narratives are incomplete because the world is simply too complicated to capture it all. Most narratives are inadequate, even as a half-built concept. We expect more from our professional intellectuals, but they're no less immune from bad judgment, especially when you're outside their field of expertise. William Shockley won the Nobel Prize for inventing the transistor, a device which revolutionized the world. But when he turned to genetic research, he came up with concepts so appalling, so inane, that even racists ran for cover. And yet, even within the field of expertise, intellectuals can blunder badly. For 100 years, we learned that the presidency of Ulysses Grant was a total failure. And then a Columbia University undergraduate published his senior thesis in the 1990s, in which he showed that Grant's administration was a particularly successful one. The 14th and 15th Amendments were imposed. Grant single-handedly destroyed the first Ku Klux Klan. He solved all the international issues from the Civil War. Incredible array of achievements. But the young undergrad, a fellow named Frank Scaturo, went further, and he traced the damage to Grant's reputation to a handful of historians from the Ivy League, but with Southern backgrounds, who were just annoyed that they lost their slaves and blackened Grant's name because, boy, what a target if you have the opportunity to destroy a man's reputation. So for 100 years, this slander was allowed to continue. The reason for this is something called cognitive bias. Cognitive bias are flaws in thinking leading to the misinterpretation of evidence. It comes in three categories: gathering information, analyzing that information, and using that information. When it comes to gathering information, you have to rely on Montaigne's observation that objectivity is a myth. It just doesn't exist. Everything is biased, even if people try to be unbiased. And the only way you can approach the truth is by reading opposing concepts and deciding for yourself who makes sense. This is complicated by the fact that everyone thinks they're the good guy, and therefore propaganda is very common. Thomas Love Peacock, 200 years ago, said that knowledge is power used by the few to mislead the many. And we've had 200 years of suffering from that advice. Narratives have to evolve. As knowledge develops, you can't rely on an old narrative. Once it becomes entrenched, however, a narrative is very hard to dislodge. Alexis de Tocqueville thought that that was a peculiarly American problem. He thought that there was less independence of thought in America than elsewhere, because when an idea takes root, no one challenges it. And if it is challenged, the challenges are usually ignored. Narratives always begin inadequately. They say that journalism is the first draft of history, but often history is merely the second draft of journalism, with all the flaws of journalism built in. Even in the hard sciences today, there's a crisis in research. A huge percentage of scientific research is either outright false or is got serious mistakes in it. It's worse in the social sciences. Brian Klass said that social scientists cling to simplistic models of reality with disastrous results instead of embracing the notion of chaos, the notion that things move in lots of different directions. They might move towards one direction, but in a world of 9 billion sentient beings, you can't count on one monolithic solution. The world demands nuance and diverse thought. From there, you have to analyze all this evidence with all its flaws. And here, there are literally hundreds of ways to misinterpret the facts. A few examples. There's confirmation bias. People tend to favor information which confirms their pre-existing beliefs. Very common. You're Republican, you want to believe what the Republicans say. You're Democrat, you want to believe what the Democrats say. And you allow yourself to be convinced improperly. There's declinism, the concept where a country is in decline so that any change will only make it worse. There's progressivism, the flip side of declinism, where the world is like the country is a mess and any change of any sort will only make it better. There's authority bias, where credence is given to ideas coming from authority figures, newspapers of record, reputable universities, whether those ideas are valid or not. You believe them simply because the leader is charismatic, or the newspaper or the university had a great reputation. There's the framing effect. This is a particular bane of poll takers, where we reach different conclusions depending on how an idea is presented to us. Same concepts, but if you put an adjective here, an adverb there, you get different results. There's coverage bias, a particular favorite of Joseph Goebbels, where anything repeated often enough becomes doctrine. There's my personal favorite, the Dunning-Kruger effect, which says that the less a person knows about a topic, the more confident he is that he's right about the... So once you wade through the morass of analyzing information, you come to decisions about how to deal with it. One of the problems is the visceral nature of modern politics. Everything is emotion. Not only that, but politicians have different incentives. They have a very short-term horizon. If something doesn't happen by the next election, it just isn't worth pursuing. Politicians also, especially ones in the leadership positions, they have a different psychology. President Trump's ambassador to Russia said that Trump's problem was that he tended to conflate his own self-interest with that of the country. But that's a common attitude of all politicians, even the greatest of them. The leader of the isolationists in Congress in 1937 was a fierce anti-fascist, despite wanting neutrality. He was bothered by Francisco Franco's successes in Spain, and he let Franklin Roosevelt know that he would publicly support him if he used the emergency exceptions of the Neutrality Acts to ship American weapons and ammunition to the Spanish Republic to fight the fascists. FDR turned him down because he didn't want to split his New Deal coalition of conservative Catholics who favored Franco and Popular Front communists who favored the Republic. So he let Franco win, and then he could blame the Neutrality Acts for doing nothing. And once you get beyond politics, you haven't come out clearly yet. There's groupthink. It's simply easier to accept other people's opinions than to adopt your own. It causes less friction in your personal life, for one thing. This is a mild form of the psychosis that Eric Hoffer identified in his classic book, The True Believer, where he found that people joined mass movements like the communists, the fascists, and so forth, because they were seeking freedom from the freedom of thought. And then when you actually sit down to try to craft a solution to a problem, You have coalitional psychology that you have to deal with. John Tooby, the founder of evolutionary psychology, said that the competition and loyalty within a decision-making group took precedent over the final decision of that group. So the politics within a small group of decision makers was far more important than the actual decision to be made. Many of these forms of cognitive bias were found in the decision by the Kennedy administration to depose and assassinate Ngo Dinh. We're all familiar with the entrenched narrative, which really hasn't moved very far. But when that narrative has gotten entrenched, a counter-narrative develops, and it evolves. And the current evolution of the counter-narrative is a rather damning one when we look at what happened to President Diem. For starters, South Vietnam was not a Buddhist country. The number of Catholics was about the same number as the number of practicing Buddhists in South Vietnam, about 10% with each group. Non-practicing Buddhists were another 10% or so, but the other 70% were Confucians, animists, and other local religions, and they had no problems with Diem. Diem himself was not anti-Buddhist. More Buddhists were in his cabinet than Catholics were, and he allowed the high command of the army to be predominantly Buddhist. He was an authoritarian, and that's one of the things that alienated him from some people in the West. But there was a cultural failure on the part of decision makers in Washington to realize that authoritarianism is part of the culture. And Diem was a mild authoritarian at that. When he discovered, for instance, that the head of his intelligence group was conspiring against him, he punished the man by naming him ambassador to Egypt. That's hardly the act of a tyrant. Keys Beach, a seasoned correspondent for the Los Angeles Times, said that Diem was the best of all Afro-Asian leaders. Then he added, not to mention Governor Wallace of Alabama. So why are we holding them to higher standards that we hold no one else to? I think the reason for that is that Diem was not a puppet. He was a leader of a sovereign state, and he saw himself as a leader of a sovereign state, and he refused to just fall back and do whatever we told him to do. You can really tell where the battle line is drawn in this because of his infamous 3-hour lectures. Those who didn't like Diem said that when Washington crafted a solution to force down the throats of the South Vietnamese, they'd go to Diem and he'd respond with a 3-hour lecture, which they deemed to be a way of avoiding engaging in the concept. Averell Harriman, one of the leaders of the anti-Diem cabal, would elaborately shut off his hearing aid and let Diem talk to a blank wall. However, other Americans, including the Ambassador Fritz Nolting and General Paul Harkins, who was the head of the military advisors, found that these lectures were extremely valuable. What Diem was trying to do when some junior staffer in Foggy Bottom State Department came to him with a proposal is he would explain Vietnamese culture, Vietnamese demographics, and explain to them why Washington's proposal just didn't work, and that by careful crafting, you could come up with something better. Nolting and Harkins both claimed that when they had one of these sessions, that they were invaluable to coming up with proposals to win the war. And he wasn't losing the war. That was another aspect of the narrative which is being disproved these days by additional evidence. The big problem between Diem and Washington was a splinter group of Buddhists who created headlines. This splinter group was dominated by communists, and the suppression of the Buddhist demonstrations in the summer of 1963, which ended Washington's support for Diem, was actually requested by the Buddhist generals in the army because they felt that if they didn't challenge this attack on the authority of the state, that they would lose face. Now, all of this had to filter back to Washington, D.C. The most seasoned correspondents were pro-Diem. Very many of them, this was their third war. Unfortunately, the media outlets with the most clout, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Associated Press, were all represented by the least experienced correspondents, juniors in their first foreign assignment. And they were guilty of the usual rookie mistakes that journalists make. Many of their sources were communist spies. One they relied on very heavily, a graduate of the University of California Journalism School, turned out to be a brigadier general in the North Vietnamese military intelligence. And even when they were relying on non-communist sources, they failed to understand that these people had an agenda. Neil Sheehan's book, A Bright Shining Lie, exaggerated a minor defeat at a town called Ap Bak. His source was the US officer who wrote the flawed battle plan in the first place, causing immense immediate casualties. This officer's name was John Paul Van, who was infuriated when the South Vietnamese generals refused to continue to follow his flawed plan and adopted their own, which caused less casualties and finally carried the day. None of that, though, reached Washington. And the decision-making was particularly flawed in the administration. They relied on newspaper reports over their government advisors and experts. What was it present here was the authority bias. The newspaper of record, they'd see it, and they would believe that over some lieutenant who'd been spending 6 months in the muck, in the jungles with troops in Vietnam. Coverage bias. Every day was a new headline from the New York Times and the Washington Post. That, combined with arrogance, cultural bias, a refusal to understand the local culture, and most importantly of all, no ability to ask what next, resulted in a war which made the assassination of Diem made it both inevitable and doomed. And that takes us to Afghanistan. The big question in Afghanistan, that's the last general, last man out in Afghanistan. The big question is, why did South Vietnam, a nation of farmers, survive 3 years after the last combat troops, American combat troops, foreign combat troops, left the country? Whereas Afghanistan, a nation of warriors, collapsed as soon as we left. To begin with, the pullout was a disgrace. If you wanted to deliberately create a disaster, you couldn't have done much better than what we did. Every step of the way was a blunder. And it had global repercussions as well. The Russian defense minister specifically cited our abandonment of Afghanistan for the reason why Russia decided to invade Ukraine. Worse, There was no need for haste. No foreign soldier had died in the previous 18 months. It was a stalemate. It wasn't a defeat situation. But it's wrong to single out President Biden. For starters, he was a politician with politicians' cognitive biases. In August of 2021, he no doubt realized that the 20th anniversary of 9/11 was going to happen the following month, and thought he'd get a good headline by being able to declare on the 20th anniversary that the last troops had come home. The people who should have told him that that's not the way to do it were the ones who failed him. His staff, the military, the State Department, they're all at least equally culpable. Nobody resigned, nobody spoke out when the decisions were being made. Everyone publicly supported the decision until much later. In this way, they made the disaster their disaster and America's disaster, not Biden's. You might detect a little groupthink and authority bias in this decision-making process. But Biden didn't snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. He snatched defeat from the jaws of stalemate. And the problem with our efforts in Afghanistan were that foreign aid programs have been broken for decades. They're just, well, the military likes to call them self-licking ice cream cones. Their purpose is just to help themselves. 60% of all foreign aid never leaves Washington, D.C. Everything gets funneled through the U.S. Agency for International Development. And when they put out contracts to build a road, to build a school, almost all of these contracts go to a handful of corporations run by retired USAID officials. Now, they don't know how to build a road or build a school, so they take 30% of the contract amount for contract administration and subcontract it out to a friend who also takes 30% of the commission. So by the time the money got to Afghanistan, there really wasn't much to do a particularly effective job. Particular example, which was interesting, was health clinics. There was a nice idea of having a health clinic within an 8-hour walk of everybody who lived in the country. There were hundreds of them scattered around the country. My office mate, who was the healthcare advisor, and he also happened to have been a Muslim himself. He was an Iranian. He was the last minister of health under the Shah of Iran. He looked at these plans and said, well, you can't have this in a Muslim country. There's one waiting room for men and women. That's unacceptable. The program director looked at him and said, why, you're crazy. These worked fine in Colombia. He wasn't aware that Colombia was not a Muslim country. As it happened, it was irrelevant because there was no effort to stock these clinics with medical equipment or medical personnel. So the ones that haven't fallen apart are just shelters for nomadic tribes who can park their sheep in the waiting room and sleep in the doctor's office before they move on. And while USAID was actually the reason we were created and sent over there, because it is broken, it's known to be broken, it's been known and impervious to reform for the last 50 years, other programs were no better. The International Monetary Fund showed up with the Afghan legislature and slapped a 300-page bill on their desk and said, pass this. And the legislature said, well, this is in English. Can you give us a Dari interpretation, version? And they said, no, pass it. They said, well, can you at least tell us what's in it? And they said, no, if you don't pass it right now, we're going to go out and you're not going to have any money. That's hardly the way to encourage a budding democracy, to further the democratic process. And believe me, every time I met a government official in the years I was there, they would mention that. Meanwhile, the UN seemed to be suffering from a declinist bias. Every time you went to them with an idea, they found 1,000 reasons why you shouldn't do it. This is not to say that many good things were not done in Afghanistan. The sad thing is that where the bulk of the money went was counterproductive. The military had achieved great results with something called CERP funds. I think it's Commander's Emergency Relief Provision or something. This was $20,000, $30,000 handed to a junior officer and told that he should find uses for it. So they built orphanages. They fixed hospitals. There was a hospital, the main hospital in Kabul, with a death rate among new mothers of about 80%. There was blood and feces rolling down the middle of the hallways. And a young New Mexican Army major rolled up his sleeves. He was absolutely disgusted. His civilian job was as a hospital administrator. He rolled up his sleeves, and in no time, he had pushed the maternal mortality rate to 20% from 80%. Another major help was Afghan immigrants. They came over here in the 70s when the wars broke out. Some of them were quite wealthy. They formed restaurant chains and all sorts of businesses. And yet when the trumpet blew, they went back to their home country and did whatever they could to make it better. They were fabulous, helpful. But it was not enough, too little, too late at countering the vast bulk of money which just was negative. The AID in particular was hated by Afghan personnel, Afghan government officials. So why did it take so long? Well, there's coverage bias. You didn't read about it in the newspapers. You had to hunt up anybody criticizing the foreign aid programs. Foreign Policy magazine did a number of articles. The Washington Post ran a single article in 2005, but it's hardly enough coverage. So the coverage bias was a problem. The press tends to be monolithic these days. They're all independent monopolies. There used to be a competition within the press. That's gone. There's also a form of bias. I don't know if anybody's done any studies on it, but it's clearly a bias, which is I'd call benevolence bias. If somebody claims they're doing something good, you tend to believe them. That's why they say that you have to be doubly careful if you're giving money to a charity with the name veteran or firefighter or dog or cat in the title, because a much higher percentage of those are fraudulent. But if foreign aid caused a stalemate, it was cultural insensitivity that lost the war. There's two examples that I'd like to make to round up the talk. First, Afghanistan was designed to be a decentralized state. It speaks 50 different languages. There's 3 villages that speak Hebrew. Nobody's Jewish. Nobody even knows where the Hebrew came from, but for hundreds of years they've been speaking it. There's another village which speaks a 1,500-year-old version of Aramaic, which is spoken nowhere else in the world. This is a map of just the major tribal ethnic groups within Afghanistan. You can see it's a rainbow of coalition of sorts of people who don't really like each other. Afghanistans don't consider themselves Afghans. They're Tajiks and Uzbeks, Hazara and Pushtun. The Northern Alliance fought the Taliban for many years because they were organized like the Indian Army, where each unit came from a different tribal group. Unfortunately, the international community took over the creation of the organization of Afghanistan, and they only paid lip service to the various tribes. The Afghan military was merged, and as a result, they lacked unit cohesion, which is an important part of any military organization. The Taliban, who were always exclusively Pashtun, recognized their opportunity, and they went among all the different tribes, recruiting disaffected members of the tribes. And once we were out, they promptly purged them all. They knew that they could increase their ranks by working on us rather than trying to sell what they did. And once we were gone, they went back and became the same old Taliban. Another problem was women's rights. Everyone welcomed schooling for girls. And thanks to the diplomacy of the US Marine Corps, they got men to accept the idea of women's suffrage. I think they were so in awe of the average Marine that when these men shamed them into encouraging them to vote for allowing their wives to vote, the men fell in line. But we didn't stop there. We insisted on having women police detectives, women fighter pilots, and this alienated the majority of Afghans. Few foreigners knew anything about the average Afghan family or the average Afghan culture. The few who did insisted that women generally were happy. Of course, they had things they'd like to change. But in Afghanistan, somewhat similar to the way America worked 150 years ago, women ran the household. They collected the paycheck, and they parceled out the money. Yes, divorce is easy, but nobody got divorces. It just wasn't done. The developed world is evolving away from marriage and childbirth. For a couple of reasons, this is almost certainly irreversible. But that means that the developed world's definition of universal women's rights is not universal at all. And by failing to allow Afghan culture to evolve in their own way, we brought the house down. The aftermath is grim. Women are prevented from being trained to be midwives. Forget getting a good education. They can't even be instructed on how to deliver babies. They're beaten for being on the street alone and not looking down on the ground and looking at people in the face through their burqas. Worse, ISIS has been assassinating Taliban ministers of state because they feel that the Taliban are too moderate. Any prospects for change are heading in the wrong direction. So have we learned anything? Going back to 1963, there's two quotes that I'd like to mention. When Ho Chi Minh was informed that we murdered Diem, he told his advisors, "I can't believe the Americans are that stupid." Meanwhile, Madame New, whose husband we murdered and whose country we abandoned, said, "Whoever has the Americans as allies does not need enemies." Unfortunately, the epitaphs of 1963 are the same epitaphs for 2021. Our opinions may change, but the arrogance remains. To improve the way we act, we must change the way we think. Thank you.
That was great. We also learned a lot of detail about the 63 situation in Vietnam that I wasn't expecting. That was really, really useful.
I left a bibliographical essay in the back, which some books that anybody interested can read if they want to read further on these ideas.
All right. So they're available on your way out. There's a couple of things that Tom has available for anybody. An essay plus the bibliography of where he got that information from. All right. So now we have what we've been waiting for. Layli Haislip, would you like to share with us your perspective?
We're going to show the.
We're going to show, before you start speaking, we're going to show the trailer. Absolutely. Is that set up? Yes. Okay, great. There's a new documentary on Netflix for those of you on the Vietnam War. It's 5 episodes, and Layli is one of the people that's interviewed in the program.
I cannot think of a more cataclysmic event than the Vietnam War.
Great.
The Vietnam War is a turning point in United States history.
Vietnam is a hellhole, the killing field, Hamburger Hill, Khe Sanh, My Lai Mexico, POWs, Viet Cong. Everything happened in Vietnam.
The story of the United States in Vietnam was a story of ignorance, hubris, arrogance.
It tended to be evil, but I don't think it was intended to be evil.
We learned how big the gap was between what presidents were saying and what they believed.
We had a fight about the train 3 years ago.
I think they were sincere in what they were doing. Problem is, they didn't know what they were doing.
Our method of operation was called search and destroy. You just hunt for people and you kill them.
You pull the trigger, you can't take the bullet back, and it changes you.
It was kill or be killed. They had to live with the nightmares.
I wasn't the same person anymore. Those are the memories that stay with me.
For Vietnamese people, the events that took place were life-defining.
Là phải nói rằng là bắn lần đầu tiên mà thấy Mỹ chết thì rất là phấn khởi.
The anger was severe, strong, boiling.
This is a television war.
Seeing the graphic images marked a turning point in the American conscience.
One of the major roles of the press is hold power accountable.
You realize that our heroes are just liars. Many of the things that plague our society today have their roots in the Vietnam era.
Our image of ourselves as the last best hope on earth was shaken.
We were playing God.
We'd lost our moral compass, and we haven't recovered.
We can't forget Vietnam. It's with us today.
Thank you. I'm a little too short, so they're a little too tall, so I will be right in the middle. It's okay? Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you so very much to invited me here. I've been in Commonwealth before, and I live here in this beautiful city before, but it's too cold for me. So I have to move back to San Diego. But I love your city, and I'm just happy to be back here. I have a lot of friends here, and also a lot of the supporters here. So I'm just happy to come back. You know, they pay me well to come here, and they invite me to be here, and they give me 30 minutes of your time to tell my story. Of 76 years old, how can I condense that down in 30 minutes? But I will try my best to just tell the story. Now, 2 gentlemen did their best to show us what happened in Vietnam. And thank you so much, Jeff, that you are heartbreaking to telling our history. Yes, we fought 1,000 years against the Chinese, and 100 years against the French. 20 years against American, nothing. So that is the life of war. I want to share the story on my experience. At a 3rd grade education, a little girl from the small village right outside of Da Nang. And so I have not a good knowledge like the gentlemen or many of you here who are well educated and learn by the books and by others how the Vietnam War happened and become the end. I tell the story about my life experience. I lived, born and raised in a war zone and left to United States in 1970 when the war was still going on in Vietnam. So I was born in 1950, early 1950, late 49, and from first 5 years, it was the French. My family is from revolutionary family. We again the French, and we support Ho Chi Minh. So all my family, we all, just like everyone in Central Vietnam, we believe in what Ho Chi Minh thought and what we believe in the villagers fought against the French. Because the French did control our country, make people into their slaves and tortures, kill, take on our food, take our duck, our chicken, our pig, our cows to their military. And Vietnamese go starving. So did Japanese, they did the same thing. So that's why as a farmer, we didn't know why they're there. We only know that they're there to destroy our land and take our food. So we fought against them. So first 5 years, two things that I never forget as a little girl, 3 years old, every time the friend came to the village, all women stand together as a group and back together to try to avoid the gang rape. And so my mother holds my niece about 1 or 2 months old, and I was 3 years old or even less, hold on her leg, and other women starting to get together. And there was one young girl, she about 11, 12 years old. She ran down the alley right in front of our house, and she called for help. Help, help. And my mother said, lay down, and hold on the bamboo bushes. Don't run over. And here 2 or 3 men run after her, trying to rape her, and they are right in front of our house. She happened to be laid down on her stomach and hold on the bamboo bushes. So 3, 4 men tried to run her over, and my mother said, don't let them run you over, don't let them run over. Then the whistle flew, and that is when they left her and left. So that image in little girl just so traumatized me, even today, every time I talk about it. So that is one story. Another story I just recently heard from my brother. He joined Viet Minh at 14 years old and left the village went to North when he was 16 in 1954. So I asked him just about a year ago, why did you join the Viet Minh? Of course, everybody did, but I just want to hear from him. And he said that one afternoon, my sister's bar, who cooked lunch in a small kitchen, and we sit down and we cook with the hay. And then the 2 French gunmen came to the kitchen and pointed the gun at my sister and wanted to rape her. Wanted her to leave the kitchen and go out and so they can rape her. My brother ran to the kitchen and stopped. He only 14, and yet the gun pointed to him and said, you leave or I kill you. And from that point on, he did not say anymore. He just started to cry, so I didn't ask more, but I don't know what happened. But that is the hatred that he carrying in himself, so that is why he joins the Ho Chi Minh and everyone in the village to go to North to learn about Vietnam. My family is a farmer. We plant rice, we harvest fruit and vegetable. We have 6 children, and I'm the youngest one. So the first 5 years, I learned everything about Vietnamese, the Viet Minh against the French. 1955, the war ended with the French. We very happy. We harvest the rice, we talk to the heaven, we sleep in a beautiful moonshine, and daytime too hot to work in the rice paddy, so we work in at nighttime, full moon. We sing, we dance, we, bury the dead, going to get wedding, get married, and just hope that our family can grow up and we have a family and happy, and we die and we bury a same graveyard. That's our ancestor. And so after the war against France, for the 5 years, 1954 to 1960, that is the 5 years of my happy life. It's my father there, my mother there had a water buffalo for pet. I had a duck, chicken, pig, dog, and cat, just like every children here had. But most of the time, that it's just beautiful, just nature. We have no electricity. We have dirt floor. We don't have running water, everything. We use the well, we use the river, we use the pond, coconut for the summer time, a pond for our water buffalo bed. I mean, with children, we're free. We have everything in our village so that we can survive and we're able to carry on our daily life. But in 1960, things start to change. Our family go out and have secret meeting and come back and say, oh, it's a new war starting. And so we have to find the way. So we start to build a bunker. We start to have secret talk. Our children have to be lie because we cannot tell stranger or even our people that we know that we call uncle or cousin or people that we play with every day. We cannot talk about our family, how many brother or sister we have. We cannot tell people how much we eat or what we cannot eat because everybody reported to everybody. So at 1960, I'm only 10 years old, but at nighttime, the Viet Cong start to come in the village in a meeting. Then as soon as the sunrise, they left. Then the South Vietnamese and American, they come in. That, with the group, it's called the American Advisor to South Vietnamese. So they come to our village, then they do what they had to do and study what they want to see, then they left. So start from 1960 to 1965, those 5 years, to Central Vietnam. I come right outside of Da Nang City. It's Quang Nam province. It's the toughest time for us. As you can see, very big in the south, Saigon, and very big in the north in Hanoi. In Da Nang City, it's very small. One side is the China Sea, another side is Trường Sơn Mountain, Ho Chi Minh Trail. And so we get very small, the weather very hot, and we work very hard for a bowl of rice. And we have fish in the ocean or in a pond. So in those 5 years, from 1960 to 1955 to 60, it's very peaceful and beautiful time. 1960 to 65, in those 5 years, I've been through torture camp, I've been raped, I've been buried to death, I've been taken care of the wound, and I witnessed nothing but just what you saw on the TV. The house is burning down, the village being destroyed, the man being tortured and woman being raped, just in the name of war. When I was 14, I already been grave at my graveside, but for some reason it didn't kill me, it let me go. And it took me to torture camp and torture me and it let me go. So here I am today. I'm not saying that the war is something that's good or bad. It's only karma that mankind created. It's a man-made war. God didn't make war. He loved everybody. So at the show tonight, talking about our culture, it's 5,000 years old, and we fought many battles, and we also survived through many battles. So at 14 years old, I have to leave the village, 1965. I left the village from Da Nang, my village to Da Nang, from Da Nang to Saigon. What do you do when you're uneducated farmer like myself and go to the big city like Saigon? Only we can do is be serving to the rich, be nana for the children, or homeless and jobless. That is the hurted Vietnamese villager the most. We have land, we have houses, we have graveyards, we have pond and ocean and river. We had everything to survive. Overnight, we end up a refugee. We refugee in our own backyard. We refugee in our own village and our own city and country. That is very sad for villagers like my family. So I work together with my mother in very wealthy Vietnamese businessman. And at 16, he gave me a baby. Every place that we work, as a young girl from the countryside, come to a city, be a maid to the rich man or rich family, usually man 1 year virgin. And so there, I had become pregnant at 16, and I had my first son at 16 years old. His wife found out when I was 6 months pregnant. She kicked me out with my mother. We be back to Da Nang city. My village now is American base, and all the refugees came all around us because my village is up in the high ground, and American came. They level every 4 hamlets, and they move people to one. So my village it become a refugee camp. And so all other village, when I was young, it had everything there. Now it disappeared. And they all moved into my village. So the refugee and American control, so I could not come back to the village, but I had to stay in Da Nang with my sister Lon. My sister Lon left, she's 10 years older than me. So in 1965, my mother and I, we have to leave the village and go to Saigon. It's so much in detail in the time, but because I have short time, I cannot tell too much. But so my mother and I have to leave our village to go to Saigon. So my sister left village in 60 because of the war started, and no woman or young girl survived without torture or rape. So all my sisters have to left home. So here, my sister Lon had to come back to Da Nang to take care of my father so that my mother and I can go to Saigon. And she came back. Now the war, the American military all over the city of Da Nang. And she could not go to the village either, so she stayed in Da Nang, and she started to work in a bar, and called bar girl, sell Saigon tea, prostitution, whatever it name is, it happened in Da Nang, in Vietnam. Before my sister become working for an American at a bar girl, we heard all about the Vietnamese woman be prostitute to the Frenchman. How horrible, how bad that was, that here we fight, our family, our village, our people, fight against the French, try to kick them out, and our women sleep with the Frenchmen and sell their body to an outsider. Our culture will not accept that, and our tradition not allows that. But here, now, second war, the American war, my sister, just like many girls, who become refugee, who could not live in the village, who have no more home, come to city, become a beggar. To Vietnamese culture, this is a very shameful, and this is especially traditional family like myself. We've been taught by Confucius, we've been taught by the Taoism, we've been taught by Buddhism, and we also have our own religion called family religion. With it, we worship our ancestors and we honor our friend and neighbor and family. So that is all we learn. Now, we become prostitute, become beggar, become spy, become liar, become cheat. Everything that our culture taught us is changed overnight. So here I was 6 months pregnant, come back to Da Nang from Saigon, and have nowhere to go. So I stayed with my sister. And she brought home her American boyfriend. With it, he come from the back door. He come in the front door. I run to the back door because it's so scary. He come with a uniform, sometimes with a gun, long gun, all the things that he carry, and I walked through the door, and I ran to the back because it looked so big, so mean, and horrible. But my sister have only a studio. So at night, when her boyfriend not coming home with her, then she sleep on a bed, I sleep on the floor. But when her boyfriend come home, then I have to be outside and looking for place to live or stay overnight. Most of the time, I live in a market with other refugees, with other homelessness. And so 6 months, 7 months pregnant, and it's cold, it's rain, it's winter, it doesn't matter. My job is to go find a place to sleep so my sister can sleep with her boyfriend in her apartment. So one day it was raining very, very hard. I could not go out. And so I cooked for her boyfriend. I shine his boots, clean his gun, serve him hot tea and beer. And so one day I asked my sister to ask him, American boyfriend who is Navy, why did he come to Vietnam? And his answer, what we here to help Vietnamese people. I said, okay. But the South Vietnamese who come to our village, they also say, we here to support you, to help you, to give you freedom from the communists. Okay? We don't know who communists is, but that's what they say. But then to Viet Cong, they also came. We cook for them, we clean for them, we did the bunker for them, we bury the dead, and we take care of the wound. For Vietnamese, so that we can have freedom, and so that we can able to keep our fatherland. So all these people take care, looking after us at a Vietnamese village. But nobody asked us, that is what we wanted? We want them there? No, we don't want anybody in our village. Just leave us alone. But nobody asked us what we want or how we want it. And so everybody end up killing everybody, just because for Vietnamese people. So when we're talking about the war, what did we learn from the war? I think the best way is just leave them alone. The CIA should not go in there and create problem. Because the best way for United States to sell the weapon, to sell all the gun, to sell all the ammunition, everything to have the men out there in the front line in battle zone, they have to have uniform, sell from condom, all the way to helicopter and tank and truck, you all know. So, but what did we know? We the farmer, we didn't know anything. So from that point on, I was thinking, oh, okay, so American here try to help Vietnamese. And that is why they're here. And so little by little, I started to stay to get the one room with American real. And so after I had my son, and of 1966, and I started to deal in black markets. My cousin who did it, she treated me how to buy stuff from the Vietnamese markets for $1. I can sell to American for $5 or sometimes $10. From little souvenir all the way to marijuana. But it face marijuana. It's not real. Then, as a Vietnamese citizen, we cannot take that money back with us because as a Vietnamese citizen, we cannot earn anything from the U.S. or taking the red currency, American money in Vietnam. And so we have to learn how to deal with it, is to add the American real, who more like friendly face, kind looking, good looking, and we asked him, can you take this money and you go into PS, which is a military market, and you buy for outreach fighting. It's soap, laundry soap, whiskey, cigarettes, gum, and whatever out that we need. So most of them come back with our merchandise, and we give them a bottle of whiskey or something, and then we take our supply. And that is how I make the money. And it's not easy to win at a Vietnamese. We have all that stuff from the PS. So when I have to go home, we have to get on a bus, and inside the bus, I have to look for a Vietnamese policeman or a Vietnamese military guy and ask him, can I sit next to you? And if any policeman or somebody or MP stop, can you say that it's your stuff? And some of them say yes. Then I will give him something when I get off the bus or he get off the bus, so that I can take all that merchandise to the Vietnamese market and I sell and I make more money that way. So that is how I support my father in a village. My mother and my son that are homeless stay with my sister, who had 9 children. And 2 of us at 11 people stay in a small house. And so my goal is to buy a mother a house. But then we Americans start also learn how to treat us. They take our money and they never come back with our merchandise. We never know what their name, we don't know what they look like. We cannot complain with anybody because we have no power. We should not have to deal with them. But again, we are refugees. And so one day, I hang around at the PS. Any of you here Vietnam veteran? Oh, great. Okay, good. Okay, good, good. So you know what PS is all about. So one day I hang around outside the PS to sell my merchandise. And one MP, we get to know each other. He named Mate, very handsome, tall, healthy, and walked to me and said, "Hey, Lily, I have something for you." Oh, I was so happy. I thought he gonna buy some stuff for me. And he looked at me, he said, "You see the 2 reais stand over the bunker?" I said, "Yes, they want something to take home?" He said, "Yes, they want you." "Want me? Why want me? I have a lot of merchandise in my buckets, but not for me." Then he said, "Yeah, they've been here for 1 year, and now they're ready to go home. And they want a souvenir by Vietnamese woman." Vietnamese woman, a lot of prostitutes right down the street. Why he want me? He said, "No, that is a lot of VD. They want a clean woman to go home, a souvenir." I did not first know what they're talking about, but at the end, I had to think. First it starts out at $20. Because the 2 men already exchanged the money to ring money to go home with. So I start out with here, $20 each, so you have $40. I said, no, I don't sell myself. I sell my product and have them go to the Sitlugger right down the street. And they said, no, they want you. From $20 up to $200. You think $200, I can buy my mother's a house, so my family, my son have a home. And what can I do? But inside of me say, how can I sell myself to a foreigner? Invader, we call them. How can Vietnamese woman can do that? According to my sister and all the neighbor and all the people, we have learned up to now. But up to $400, I could not refuse, $200 each. That $400 helped me stop to do in black market, bought my mother and my son a home right on the beach. That is when I start in new life. So after that, I learned little English there and here. Then I started to looking for a job to work with American. And I work for Navy, I work for Army, right on they call it China Beach. While my sister high and my father and all my uncle, my nephew, my cousin fought against American. And my sister-in-law and I sleep with American, taking the money from the American. We have no way. We're not ashamed, but we're not proud either. I am here to say this. Sold myself to American for $400. It's nothing that I say I'm proud of, but also nothing that I say that is I'm ashamed of. Because thing when we have to do, it's just like every serviceman. The country call, you go. Every time it taxes due, you have to pay. Same with a Vietnamese woman. No, we're not supposed to be prostitute to outsider. We should marry to Vietnamese and have a family Vietnamese. But hey, so many men come in, paying goods, helping us, taking care of us. Besides, when I have a son already, even though I'm only 16 years old, no Vietnamese marry a woman who already have a son. Too old. They have to be a virgin. And that is why so many Vietnamese women, when the husband left, they have 1 or 2 children, either marry to American or even be a prostitute or do any kind of job to support their kid. That is ugly of war. Turn our country upside down and turn our culture inside out. Change everything. So 1969, when my husband, Edmund Rowe, came from Utah and looking for work in Vietnam, he's a World War II veteran. He's as an engineering, Soviet engineering, and to come to Da Nang to build roads and bridges. So he just landed. He just landed in Da Nang 1 week before. And somebody gave him a name where it's a red light district for him to go. And so while he would just get off the bus looking for what to do, my friend happened to walk by and say, he asked her, can you help me? Where can I go for this? And she said, oh, that's bad, don't go there. And same time, I happened to ride my motorcycle right past to her, and she said, Lee, come. So, okay, I run around, I come to her, and she said, this man, he just come to Vietnam. He have a lot of money. He want a girlfriend, but he want to go to the red light district, too dangerous for him. I don't want him to go there. Can you go with him? I said, I'm only 19, and he's 53 years old. I said, no, he's too old. She said, yeah, but I have 6 children at home, and she's pregnant. And she said, I need this money. I need that money for my kid. Can you just say, yeah, you go with him, and then we can run away. I look at the old man, what can I do? Right at the bus station. So I look at him, I look at her, I say, okay, yeah. I thought, she go her way after he pay her something, and I go my way on motorcycle. No way he can get up with me. But our plan is not like God's plan. He chased after me, and he caught me. I end up marrying him. All that in a movie. So he brought me to San Diego. I had a son with a Vietnamese, and then now I had a son with him at 20 years old, 1970, and he's 53. People thought he adopted me and brought me home. And here I'm here twice with 2 kids. Now, come from village to Saigon, it's just like from hell to heaven. And now come from war zone country to San Diego, another heaven. Way too much for me to observe. The culture shock, the culture differences, everything I can able to accept and learn as I go. But one thing make me very hard for me is because I am happen to be Vietnamese. My husband, families, own in Navy. His 2 sons also in Navy and in Da Nang, and I met both of them there. Now I come here, every morning they go for work at the Navy, and they come back talking about war in Vietnam, and everything looking at me, my problem. And here, my husband, own way, help me or tell them about his side, because he World War II veteran. He been live in Vietnam and marry me, and so he know what's going on there. But his family, looking at Vietnam War, it's just different way. Every time American men killed or wounded and put them in a casket and send them home, they look at me and they say, oh, shame on you that you people killing our people. And here I have no say. Every time the Vietnamese village is burning down, the woman run out in smoke behind her with children in her arm, people die, people wounded. The whole village destroyed. They look at me, they say, shame on you, that you people like war, killing each other, bad. I have no say, I have no voice, just like in Vietnam. We have no voice, no faces, no name. We only obey who come to our village with a gun, who come to our village. We have to obey, we have to listen. Or we be raped, or we be killed, or we be tortured. No others different. So now I'm in San Diego, and I look at my family-in-law. I can't say anything because I have not enough English to explain about how the Vietnamese feel about the war. So 1973, my husband passed away, and 1974, I met my Dennis Hayslip, my late husband, who is not Vietnam veteran, but he Korea veteran. He fought in Korea. And for some reason, he hated communists. He did not want to see the war over. So because of my sister-in-law had 2 sons is immigration. The father is American and she Vietnamese. She sent me a telegram. She said, you have to come and help me to get me out of Vietnam because communists going to kill my sons because they have American. And so she ran from Da Nang to Saigon. And at that time, I have not married to my husband, Hayslip, yet. We just dating. But I took out everything I have in my savings, is $10,000, and sent my fiancé to Vietnam to get my sister-in-law and her 2 sons out of Vietnam. It's in 1975. So he was stuck in there and he was late. And after April 30, 10 days later before he showed up. And I thought he dead. I thought that he gone. And so here, one night, he just showed up with my sister and 2 sons. He stuck in Guam for 10 days. And without no way communication, anything. At that time, when he come back, I found out that I also pregnant with my 3rd son, and my sister and her 2 sons moving with us. So now the war ended in Vietnam, but just started in our family room. My husband cannot accept the North win in the South. He thinks we should go kill all the communists, win the war, and come home. So many people in San Diego who are Navy think and say the same thing. And here I look at myself, I was so happy to see the war end. I'm so grateful that now my brother can come home, my uncle, my nephew, and cousin. 17 members have traveled to North in 1954. And all the mother in American and all the Vietnamese mother and wife and brother and sister will reunite because of the war end. That's what we fight for. That is why we fought, so we want to have Vietnam for Vietnamese. But my husband did not agree. Anyhow, the Vietnamese children ran from Vietnam to American without parents, and so their children have nowhere to go. I end up bringing in 17 foster sons to my home. So I have all boys except me in the family. I turned my house into a refugee camp for the children. We had each boy have different. They have all different religions. They have from Catholics to Cao Dai, Hoa Hao, Buddhists. I'm Buddhist. And so my husband and 3 of our sons have baptized in a Southern Baptist church. And so we have our own holy war in the house every day, every Sunday. I have to wrap up one group here, one group there, one group there. Then I went to my temple, then I picked this group up, come home. My husband said, you have to go to have baptized in the church. No, we don't want to go have baptized in your church. We're okay the way we are. Anyway, long story, we fought, we argued, so he died on me. In 1983, he died. Now I end up with all the kids. I have a restaurant, not a restaurant, a deli. I have a full-time job. So anyway, he died. Now what I'm gonna do? Well, 1983, I thought to myself, now I have to become smarter, be a good businesswoman. And so I went and take lesson to become real estate agent. And so from 1983 to 85, I owned 5 houses and a restaurant. And I thought, oh, I am just, like a middle-class American here in San Diego. But the problem is I had 3 sons, and I had a restaurant, and I had 4 children. Some of them still with me, and most of them grow up and got married and move out. One son my oldest son is in UCSD as a computer science. And so I have all these healthy children, happy, money in the bank. The restaurant, I serve 200-300 people a day. And I come home an empty house. My children went to bed without dinner. And I feel so lonely and empty, even though I be with people every day in my restaurant. But it just feels different. I miss something in life. I'm not happy with everything I have. So I come up with an idea. Okay, let's go back to Vietnam and see my mom. But back in 1985, nobody could go to Vietnam. Everybody want to get out of Vietnam at a boat people and every which way they can get out of Vietnam. And here, I don't know any better. I want to go back, but how and how to get there? So I wrote a letter to President Reagan, asked him to please help me to go back to Vietnam and see my mom. Nobody answered me. And so I made a copy of the letter, put in my purse, and every time I see the man with suit and tie, I figured he working for governments. So, and so I asked him, can you help? And I showed him the letter. He read it and sent a letter to Sacramento. Nobody answered my request. One man in a bar, he take out his pencil, write down the napkin, call this number in UN in New York. And I don't know where New York is, and I don't know what UN stand for. But I took the napkin, I come home, and I call. And there was, when I asked my son to help me to write a letter to Reagan, my son said, Mom, our president, he is a very busy man. He's not going to help somebody like you. And here I get a head joke, and I say, well, if he sent a man to the moon, why can't he send a woman back to her rice paddy? Simple. So the letter went. Anyway, when I called the man from the UN in New York, and he answered, I can feel that he's Vietnamese. So I tell him in Vietnamese, I say, my mother is 70 years old, and I want to see her before she dies. Can you help me to find a way to go to Vietnam? And he said, oh yeah, we can help you to find you to go to Vietnam. I said, don't you know, Vietnam is a communist country, and I am a U.S. citizen. If I go there, they're gonna put me in jail, and I never can get out to come home with my children here in America. And he said, you know who you're talking to? I said, no. And he said, you talk to the communist of Vietnam right now. A communist of Vietnam in New York? I hung up the phone very fast. For 3 days and nights, I could not sleep, I could not eat. I waiting for FBI come and get me, or policeman, or somebody. I call and talk to the communists. Oh my God, you talk about 1985. 3 days, nobody came, nothing happened. So I called him back. And I started to sing for him the song that I learned in those years that growing up in Vietnam with the Viet Minh and with the Viet Cong. So he asked me, how do you know the song? I said, yeah, I'm with the Viet Cong. My family with Viet Minh and revolutionary, we fight against American. He said, so how do you live in America? I said, I'm here. Anyway, he said, okay, write out a request letter so then we can help you. Send the letter to New York, forgot about it, but 6 months later, I get a visa approval and letters to say, okay, I'm going home. Now, I have 5 houses, a restaurant, 3 sons. I'm a widow, single mom. What if the communist of Vietnam keep me there and not allow me to come back here? What happened to all my wealth? So I have to think very carefully, just like when I sold myself to $400. What would I do as a mother, as a daughter? One side I have 3 sons and all the wealth, another side I have 70 years old mom. If I have to sacrifice myself, what and how I will do it. So I call my lawyer, sign over the power of attorney to him, give him, if I cannot come back here by April 30th, you can put my children in foster home and take care of my wealth. Because my children will survive and doing well in this country. My mother also will die in Vietnam with or without seeing me. So if I have to give myself up for a sacrifice, as a Vietnamese, as an Asian culture, we go to our roots. Without my mother, I wouldn't be here. Without her being here, I would not have my sons or my wealth. Therefore, I give everything to my attorney and go to Vietnam. A long story short, I was shocked when I get there. Vietnam is so poor. The war is one thing, but the embargoes by United States, that's another thing. When I left Vietnam, Vietnam is the richest and wealthy country because of all the dollar, all the American dollar go in there, billions of dollars each day. Now, poor, people starving to death. I was shocked. I could not deal with it. I made my time from Saigon to Da Nang to see my mom. First person I want to see is my mom. Second person I want to see is my brother's Bong, who left the village when I was 1955. I was 5 years old. Now I'm 35. I want to see what he looked like. I know he a Communist Party. No way he will see me or accept me as American whore, they will call me. And how can he accept me as a sister? But the love for the family, the blood in the family, I must see him. So, long story short, he had to add many permission from his authority for see a sister from the U.S. So here we had a big dinner, and I offered him some chocolate candy I brought home. He looked at the candy and he said, "No, I cannot eat your candy because American people put poison in the candy for you to take home to kill me." Never thought in a million years this gonna happen. My mother sit in the middle, and she said, "Look, you the oldest son, and she's the younger daughter. It doesn't matter where you come from, but you here with me. Forget everything. Just enjoy the dinner, enjoy the candy, and make me happy just you two reunite." And I just look at her and just cry because I never thought a million years that my brother thought that I'll come back and kill him. Anyway, I was 2 weeks in Vietnam, and I came back. I just happy. I saw my mom, I saw my brother, everything okay, even it's very poor. But I'm okay, they're okay, and now just find a way how I can help Vietnam. Well, when my son picked me up at the Los Angeles airport, he said, "Mom, the FBI want to see you." Okay. I thought to myself, and I told myself, why did they want to see me? Before I left for Vietnam, I called 3 times to State Department and asked them, how can they help me to go to Vietnam? They said, "No, you cannot go to Vietnam. Vietnam is a communist country, and you U.S. citizen. And we have no diplomat. We have no relationship with communist country. And if something happened to you in Vietnam, we cannot help you." 3 times, no. But I don't know any better. I win anyway. So now I'm conquer my dream, and I come back, and they want to see me for what? So I own a restaurant. I have a lot of fortune cookies. So I brought home some fortune cookie and hot tea, and here 2 young men from Washington, D.C. came to visit me. 3 questions they asked. Why did you go to Vietnam? Who do you see in Vietnam? And what are you doing there? My answer was, I see my mom and my sister. I don't dare to tell him I have a brother. And I visit the country, and everything okay, but a very, very poor. And I told him, I want to help rebuild Vietnam. I help my people because they're so poor. He said, "Oh, good. If you go to Vietnam and help your people, we can help you to get there." I said, oh, wow, I'm so happy. He said, but you have to bring some messages. And I thought, oh, yeah, you must be fall in love with Vietnamese woman before, and now you want me to bring love letter back and forth, simple thinking. He said, no, we want you to check out 3 things for us. Tell us what the government of communist government, how they run the country, and how many Russians in Vietnam today, and what happened all the military supply that left in Vietnam after 1975. If you can bring out those 3 things, we will pay you way and we will help you to help you people. At first I didn't get it, but then I said, you asked me to be spy? And one said, oh no, nothing like that. Another one said, yeah, something like that. And so I just said, no, I can't do that. I can't read and write well. He said, you don't have to. You ask somebody to do it, then give it to you and you bring back. I said, oh, my family are plant rice. They're so poor. They're hungry. They're starving. Nobody thinking about reading and writing. And one said, Mrs. Hayslip, you live here in this freedom country, and you have to help us to keep the communists out there. Another one said, yeah, you have to help us. And I just said, look, you American, I'm Vietnamese. You man, I'm woman. You want war, I want peace. You want hatred, I want compassion. So I will go to Vietnam to help my people without you help. Anyway, both of them left my house very unhappy faces. But that it put me in a corner. I have to first get rid of my restaurant, get rid of my houses, get a small house right up in the hill by myself, and I start to write the books. Because until that point, I can see that the war is misrepresented, it's misunderstanding. I can see now that both sides not want to talk about the war, have nothing to do with war, and don't mention about it. So I start to write the book and send out to about 20, 30 publishers. 21 turned down. They say, no, we don't want to hear about communists, we don't want to hear about Vietnam, la, la, la. Anyway, finally, Doubleday, take the book. So 1986, that's when my first trip to Vietnam. 1988 is my second trip to Vietnam. I happened to be here at this airport in San Francisco. I met up with a group of Vietnam veterans. They call the Vietnam Veteran of America. 20 of them ready to go back for healing. And because Tet Offensive in 1968, 20 years later, 1988, they come to Hue. They come to Vietnam in memory. So I joined them. They're happy to help me. I'm happy to help them. So we hang out together 2 weeks in Vietnam. That is when I learned about we American citizens, we do have power. We have voice. We have a chance to change things. They're talking about the embargo, how we're going to get the government to lift embargo. How can we reconcile? How can we bring the veteran back and talk to Vietnamese veterans so that they can healing? All this going on. We have about 22 people, and we have doctor with PTSD, veteran. I mean, it's chaos, but we make it through. We visit Saigon, we visit Da Nang, we visit Hue, we visit Hanoi. After the 2 weeks with them, I can see it healing right in my face. I can see that when the group of veterans talk to a group of North Vietnamese or Viet Cong or villager, they all cry, they all happy, they all open arms and hug each other, and they all think this is the best way to let the war go and receive as a long-lost brother. Vietnamese do not accept Russia. but they accept American. If they ask you, are you American or Russian? We say, we're American. They're so happy. They up and on. But back in those days, the government not allow any Vietnamese communicate with outsiders, especially American. Anyway, as a Vietnamese, over here, when I come back, the Vietnamese here and some veteran thought I worked for the communists. That's why I can come and go. In Vietnam, they thought I was working for CIA. So both sides, always in between. First, after the book accepted by Doubleday, I set up a non-profit foundation called East Meet West. And with all the money from the movie, from the 2 books, and lectures, and money that I received from many donors, especially the veteran and their family, helped me. We built 6 general hospitals, 20 universities, schools, international center. I mean, from A to Z, we rebuilt Vietnam. We put over $1 billion easy to Vietnam for that 40 years, since 1988. The healing to up and download, to bring U.S. and Vietnam together as today. Recently, in March, I was in Vietnam last March to do 3 things. First thing was March 8, 1965, first 3,500 Marines landed in Da Nang, in my city. I don't know how many of them returned, and I don't know how many of them killed in Vietnam. But I know the war in Washington, D.C., at least it's 58,000. On the other hand, Vietnamese, between 3 to 5 million died. Therefore, we have to honor those souls. We have to honor the dead. Secondly, on March 29, 1975, all American personnel and the Vietnamese who fight with the American against Viet Cong, communists, have to leave Da Nang. Therefore, so many of them die, so many of them drown, so many of them lost everything and go. We need to honor them too. And then a third thing, that 30 years that I working so hard with so many other non-profits that trying to bring U.S. and Vietnam together. 30 years. We also need to celebrate and thank them. So what we do is we not only work and help the living, but we also work for the dead. Because if the dead can be happy, can leave the water, can come home with us, be with the family, the living will have more peaceful harmony. And that is, at a Vietnamese, at a Buddha way, at an ancestor worshiping, we always thinking about the living or the dead as the same. We live with them. We honor them. We recognize them. We recognize the French who were there for 100 years. We recognize the Chinese there for 1,000 years. Why not American? I'm married to American, fall in love with American, have American children. I've been living here in this country. They're so good for me and also many, many Vietnamese refugees who were happy here and who are doing very well. So thank you for all of you here and all of you out there have been helping me for 40 years. I have a new book come out this year. It's a photo book. It's a coffee table book. And just say to thank you to every of you who helping me, supporting me, and donate the money for me to help rebuild Vietnam. The man here, Stanton, who traveled with me to Vietnam a couple of times, also helped me very much. I'm here, he hosted me and one of our supporters. So thank you so much. Can you stand up to everybody say hello? Here, a Vietnam veteran, was in Da Nang. Yeah. And so that is what we did. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You can just sit down if you like. Yeah. for a very good reason. We'll have a slightly shorter Q&A.
Thank you.
But we're going to do a little bit of questions. Do you have something for me?
Oh, by the way, they want me to sing too.
Oh.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So first, thank all three of you very much. That was a great variety of background about thinking about this problem. And we're going to start with the question for Jeff Shaw. I was an officer on an aircraft carrier off the coast of Vietnam in 1970 when we read the Stars and Stripes, which is the military newspaper, about the students massacred at Kent State. Is this incident taught at the Naval War College? And he said it seemed to him like the country was falling apart when he heard that story.
So, yes, as part of an analysis of institutional context and the cultural manifestations of the strategy formulating process and the domestic constraints, the domestic concerns, and all the many factors that go into the political decisions, which are the catalysts for developing military strategies to achieve those decisions or objectives. So it is, but it's not a specific course in and of itself. Kent State and other movements in the United States at that time are certainly considered in the process of discussing the Vietnam experience.
Great. Tom, this is a question for you. Could you be explicit about your own cognitive biases? He mentioned about DM, and also in regard to Afghanistan, he said you mentioned that they were a nation of warriors.
Oh, well, they certainly are a nation of warriors. I mean, one of the things that's interesting about the Afghans is that they don't have anything to do with each other. They were just the toughest guys in the neighborhood. The British moved north, and that's where they could stop. The Russians moved south, that's where they were stopped. The Chinese moved west, and that's where they were stopped. The Persians moved east, and that's where they were stopped. So the only thing they had in common was that they beat everybody. Mm-hmm. And the tragedy of it was that when we were there, you just saw the culture flowering. The young people came out. They started making movies. They started to create art galleries. They opened radio stations. They did all sorts of things. And you'd go to the campus, and all of a sudden it was going back to the 50s, where the boys and girls were respectful of each other, but they were free. You know, the standard stereotype of a college in the 50s. Mm-hmm. And that was it. And it was like watching a flower open. Mm-hmm. And then it's been stomped and ground into the dirt. And that creates a cognitive bias, because it's simply you were watching something grow and flourish, and then we just chopped it off. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
When I growing up, we understand a little bit of Buddhism. We don't understand much because we don't have temples at our village. But we had monks who come and do ceremony if we need them. But most of, I would say, 60% Vietnamese is called the Đạo Gia. That means family relations. You worship our ancestors. You don't go to temple. You don't go to churches. You learn from elderly, from people that passing down many good things. Like you worship our ancestors. Take care of the graveyard, take care of the soul, believe in reincarnation, believe in karma. So all of those things is in Buddhist family. And so when the American came, just like Ngô Đình Diệm in 1960 and on, he turned everybody, okay, go back, 1956 or 58, supposed to have an election to see who won, but then they can become the leader of Vietnam. the Ngô Đình Diệm and his family came to the village, have an ID card made with a cross on each ID card that show that they're Catholics, so they can vote. And that is how we can able to say that we're not Buddha. We not religion, we just Catholic. And that is what turned a lot of people off, especially in the village. So what they did that, every family have a choice for ancestors. They came and they turned the gun over and they just go like this, take everything down and put up a big fortress of Ngô Đình Diệm right in the middle of the altar. And make us, some go crazy because, it's just like we can worship our ancestors, we can't do anything. We become Catholic overnight. And that is how it was then. So the war going through after 75, communists come in, of course, they don't want any religions. But little by little, they come back. And they went through a lot of turmoil because of that. And so now they're okay. They're not limited, but a lot of money come from overseas. The build justice, especially Christianity, come and all kind of religion now is come back. They have some still control, some. Right. Yeah, but still have freedom much more now than way back and when I was growing up.
It's true in a lot of communist and post-communist countries that were against religion for a long time. When I was there in '73 in the Soviet Union, they had a museum to religion and atheism was the name of the thing, and it was all about the histories of how foolish what people believed was before. But of course, Russian Orthodox religion is completely back, and that's true just about everywhere. That communists tried to reverse that. All right. Speaking of Russia, what role, if any, did the Soviet Union play in Vietnam? How big a role did they play in backing Ho Chi Minh?
Well, one of the things that's interesting is that at the beginning, China was the big assistant to North Vietnam, and over the years of the Vietnamese War, the Russians became the major suppliers of North Vietnam. And after we left, we talked about the domino theory, which was that after Vietnam fell, then Laos and Cambodia would fall, and then Thailand would fall, and then the rest of Southeast Asia and Indonesia. But what's interesting is that in 1979, the North Vietnamese, after communism took over Laos and Cambodia, the North Vietnamese invaded Thailand, and it was China that attacked North Vietnam and forced them to withdraw from Thailand. So if there was, and because the reason why is that China was afraid of having the Soviet Union to the north and Soviet satellites to the south. Mm-hmm. And so if there was a domino effect, and it's very hard to prove something that didn't happen, but if there was a domino effect, it was China that prevented it from going any further. And it's a very interesting, if you study the geopolitical aspects of the Vietnamese War, North Vietnamese went from being an ally of China to being ally of the Soviet Union, because they were the major supplier. And if you remember towards the end of the war, when Nixon sunk all those ships in Haiphong Harbor, there were Russian supply ships. And so what role did Russia play? They were a supplier, certainly. And some people say that some of the flyers were, the aviators were Russian Air Force. But the switch went from being a Chinese ally to a Russian ally.
When you were telling your story, you were just talking about how it was just 1,000 years of Chinese and 100 years of French. Did the Russians show up in the mythology at all in your mind? No. No. Okay. With apologies to Stansfield Turner, since World War II, we've had one draw, that's Korea, one victory that turned sour, that's the Gulf War I, and perhaps 4 losses. Did we learn anything? Is that? Do you think that that's an accurate way of looking at it?
No. I'm not sure what the 4 losses are. Some, yes. But it's an enduring question, and it's a true concern, especially after August of 2021. And that's not to say that the Biden administration did something wrong, but over the 19 years that we're in Afghanistan, that's a separate standalone issue. The withdrawal, that's a separate issue, but certainly the problem of formulating a military strategy to accomplish a political objective has become complex. And for a variety of reasons, these issues appear to be more confounding than they were in the past. You know, I gave that example of the different levels of war, different types of war. You look at some of the 20th century wars in which we were engaged. World War II, for example, you have less strategic incongruence when you're fighting Germany and Japan and when your political objective is to destroy your adversary's government and military. That makes it easier to design strategies to do that when you're dealing with what Clausewitz would call an unlimited war. My objective is to destroy your adversary's government. Ulysses S. Grant did it during the Civil War. And it was clearer. It was more easier to develop that military strategy. Today, with a variety of non-state actors, terrorist organizations, allies and adversaries that constantly going from one camp to the other, it is complex, but we continue to try and figure out solutions. We don't get it right every time.
All right. One of the questions here is that the Vietnam War versus the Korean War are fairly similar in some ways, but they were asking whether the way the media worked in the Korean War, if the media had worked the same way in the Vietnam War, would it have been a different war? In other words, is one of the biggest differences between how the media covered the war?
Yeah, I came here in 1970, and 5 o'clock, evening news on Water Congress talking about the war. That's the only that I remember. But what shocked me the most were the books and a movie. And the news about the war is, we in Vietnam, we don't see it. We only learn how to survive. We only have to take cover and all that. But come here and look at it. Oh my God, that's what happened there? You know, that is a lot of students come here to study and they see the same thing. We in Vietnam, we don't see it. You know, if people in the city, they don't even know the war in the countryside. And we from the countryside, we don't know how the city people have such a good life until we come here and we see the difference. And so I think that is the press, now that I know that I've been working with press for the last 30 years, it's helping to tell the story. It doesn't matter good, bad, or different for us to learn, and they did their job. And helping me to get my book out there and get my voices out there and get the Vietnam there today, it is part of it. Press, and news. The people did their job. The New York Times book review, David Hammer, the person who first reviewed my book on a New York Times front page, that is what made my book to Oliver Stonehand, because he reviewed it. He just come out a new book, and he was there for many years. And new book he just come out last month is about what he learned in Vietnam. And I haven't read the book yet, but what he learned about the war and how the Americans deal with journalists like him in there, but I don't know what in there. Yeah.
All right, well, we've run out of time, but there's one question here, which is also for you, Layli, which is, you're a singer.
Oh.
and people would like to hear what you sing, one of your songs.
Okay.
Would you be willing to share one?
Sure.
Okay, great.
That's okay with you, gentlemen?
Absolutely.
Sure,
That's the way we'll finish.
Of course.
Okay. You know, we grow up in a village. Just like I described earlier, we have everything for children to run, to play with. So when you come to United States, we miss all those things. It's just like you go another third world country, you will meet your hamburger, your hot dog, your pizza, all those things. So here the Vietnamese, at the villager, we miss all those things. So here is the song, what do we miss? So this is to say I'm lost in the West. You have everything, but you miss all the good thing with it very simple thing. So this is the song that describes what we miss. Lang thang giữa chốn đất người, thương quê tôi thốc nên lời nhớ quê. Dù đấy đầy đủ mọi bề, hồng tôi vẫn thiếu tình quê lạ lùng. Nói ra ai hiểu cho cùng, nhớ sao tiếng mũi ngồi mộng vó ve. Nhờ từng cây tiếng bụi tre, gió đưa cọc kẹt mà nghe âm lòng. Nhớ sao hương lúa dèo trong, nhớ sao hương khói đồng đồng thơm tho. Nhớ gà gai sáng ó ó, nhớ thằng trẻ hát hoặc mò thèn bơm. Nhớ khi nồi đất quặng rơm, nhớ nhiều khúc mía lùi thơm phất thèm. Nhớ nhiều nhạc tiếng ru êm, nhớ sao cho hết nỗi niềm nhớ thương. That is a song of love and missing the thing that you grow up with, and you don't have it here. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
So thank you all for coming. And as I said on the way out there, there's two things from Tom, an essay by him and the bibliography for background on his research for the paper. And Lei Lee has books out in front if you want to buy one of her books that she wrote. And we'll see you again in September for our next Humanities West Presents program. And thank you very much. And so ends another event at the Commonwealth Club in its 124th year of enlightened discussion, and it's the 43rd year for Humanities West.
What are you presenting next year?
Next year? Oh, so in September, we're doing the Grand Alliance. For those of you who know Kirk McKenzie, it's a program he's worked on before. We started off as it was going to be the 60th anniversary of the end of World War II, and we're actually doing it on the 80th anniversary. But anyway, the 80th anniversary, and we have two people coming in. One is we're going to talk about what that alliance was like, because we're going to start in 1944 when they realized that they're going to win the war, and somebody is going to put Stalin's point of view, what he was trying to achieve, and another professor is going to give the FDR and Churchill differing views on it, and to see how they each were trying to out-strategize each other in order to get what they wanted after the war once they realized they were going to win the war. So that's our program in September. In February of 2026, we're going to have Ansel Adams in the world of photography. And in July 1st of 2026, who can guess what we're going to do July 1st of 2026? 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. So those are our next three programs that we've lined up for the next year. So thank you very much for coming. It's great to see everybody again.